Relations Committee will come to order. I first want to welcome our nominees and thank them for their willingness to serve our nation. You've made incredible sacrifices, and we thank you for your continued interest in serving our country, and we thank your families because we know you can't do this without the support of your families. This is our first committee hearing since the return from the August recess. A lot of us had a chance to travel during the August recess. I had a chance to meet with President Zelensky at the Ambassador conference in Italy, along with Senator Wicker, and along with Senator Marshall and Senator Graham. And we had a chance to talk to him directly about the current challenges in Ukraine. And I must tell you, it is heartbreaking to see what Mr. Putin is doing in regards to the attacks against civilian populations and the infrastructure of Ukraine. So I've issued a statement today that says, in light of the recent Russian actions, the time has come to further loosen restrictions on Ukrainians' use of American-provided weapons, giving the Ukrainian armed forces greater flexibility against military targets will degrade Russia's ability to attack the Ukrainian people. I hope that the United States will give these permissions without delay. It's time to allow Ukraine to be able to defend itself against these air attacks in a more effective way, and the United States needs to be the leader in that regard. I might tell you we also had a chance to travel to Brussels to meet with our NATO Secretary General, who sends his best to Ambassador Smith. It was a great visit with Secretary Stoltenberg. He was very optimistic about the progress that we've made in unity among the NATO partners, particularly as it relates to support for Ukraine. NATO's taking a larger and larger role in that regard, and I think that's in large measure thanks to the work of Ambassador Smith. The Washington Summit was a great success, the unity there for Ukraine, and a movement towards recognizing the threat of China. So it was a good visit, and we look forward to advancing the support for Ukraine and the strength of NATO. Today, the world faces multiple, various serious crises. Before I do that, I see that Senator Hemley has joined us, and I wanted to welcome him officially to our committee. Senator Hemley, you are fortunate not only to be in the United States Senate, but to serve in this committee. We hope you feel that way during the next couple of months. But we know that you're ready to get started. You come with a great deal of experience, being the former chief of staff for Governor Murphy of New Jersey. You're a product of New Jersey, which is, I think, very valuable for our committee. You served as a staff person for Senator Lautenberg. That gets you very high marks around here. And then you served on the staff of Senator Booker. We'll see whether that gets you high marks or not as we go through this. But we thank you for your willingness to serve, and we look forward to working with you on this committee. Today, the world faces multiple, various serious world crises. Some of these conflicts are in the headlines, like the war in Ukraine or the war in Gaza. Others get less attention, like Venezuela, Burma, and Sudan. To advance American interests and values and confront these challenges, we must fill one of our most important diplomatic posts, the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. Ambassador Smith confirmed you will lead the State Department's regional and bilateral policy making across 8 bureaus. So I look forward to hearing from you about what you will do to advance a foreign policy agenda centered on American values. How will you work to protect U.S. citizens and U.S. interests, defend human rights, fight corruption, and strengthen democracies around the world? This matter is standing up to autocrats who mock our values, our interests in the international community, and our democratic processes. And it matters to our allies. As you know from our work at NATO, our best partners are the democracies of the world. If confirmed, you will play a key role leading our diplomatic efforts with our allies and partners, not only to address the conflicts that touch millions of lives around the world, but to seize opportunities to advance our interests and values globally. Senator Shaheen will give a more full introduction to you prior to your testimony. Ms. Hallett, if confirmed, you'll be our next ambassador to Bahrain. As host to the Fifth Fleet and forward element of the Navy's Central Command, Bahrain is on the forefront of our common defense against Iranian aggression. Bahrain has been a stalwart partner in peace, and in a region marred in challenges, Bahrain continues to make progress in areas that reflect our shared interests, like in the recent prisoners' release. Ms. Hallett, I hope you will speak about how you would continue to build on this important relationship, deepening our cooperation and progress across all of our shared interests, including continuing to enhance respect for human rights and the rule of law. Ms. Dashman, if confirmed, you will be taking over our mission in Togo as it faces a profound struggle with political freedoms. A constitutional change enacted earlier this year will allow Togo's current head of state to remain in power indefinitely. This decline in democratic rights comes at the same time that the country faces attacks from militant groups in the Sahel. I hope you will discuss how the United States should best go about supporting counterterrorism efforts while at the same time continuing to push for respect for fundamental freedoms. Mr. Heath, if confirmed, you'll be our ambassador to Malawi, which is scheduled to hold presidential elections next year. I look forward to hearing from you about how the United States can support a credible contest and how we plan to help the people of that country fight pervasive corruption. Mr. Jones, I want to express appreciation for the critical role you played for more than a year to prepare for the NATO summit. I'd like to hear how you think we can support Bosnia's fragile governing institutions in the face of efforts by bad actors inside and outside the country to impede progress if you're confirmed to be the ambassador there. It's been now 20 years, and we're still working under the same Dayton Accords, which was a temporary structure for power in the country, sharing of power. How can we move forward with the constitutional reforms that are going to be necessary if Bosnia is truly going to be an independent, effective country? We should not allow Russian-backed media or politicians to undermine Bosnia's efforts to deepen ties and integrate with Europe. Before turning to Senator Risch, let me acknowledge today marks the anniversary of 9/11 attacks that forever changed our country. I still remember that day vividly, as I'm sure many of you do as well. While it has been more than 2 decades since that terrible morning, the pain of that day remains raw for many Americans. Around this time, 23 years ago, the first World Trade Center tower collapsed, and Flight 93 crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, due to the heroism of those Americans. Today and every day, we should honor those Americans and the lives of those that were lost that day. With that, let me turn it over to my distinguished partner, the ranking member, Senator Risch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I think all of us are mindful that today is 9/11, and we will be, I'm sure, our entire lives. That day clearly changed America. We realize that we do have vulnerabilities, and unlike a lot of countries that are on the front line of fighting, U.S. generally isn't. So when something like this happens, it brings home to us very clearly some of the needs that we have to protect this country. And the country has changed since then, and certainly we're much more aware of the vulnerabilities that we have. Thank you to our nominees for being here today. I want to talk about each of them briefly, starting with the nominee to be Undersecretary for Political Affairs, Ambassador Smith. I appreciate your service as the U.S. Ambassador to NATO, especially during this crucial time of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. There's no doubt that that has been and continues to be important. However, if confirmed, you'll be responsible for the formulation and conduct of U.S. policy globally. Beyond addressing Russia's war against Ukraine, the U.S. #1 challenge is China. We cannot take our eyes off this strategic priority. We must do more to combat China's efforts to dominate the Indo-Pacific and exert malign influence across the world, including at international organizations and in Africa and even in our own hemisphere. I fear and I feel as if the administration has had a policy of de-escalation that has only weakened U.S. interest. I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts on that. Additionally, Iran and its proxies, including Hamas, continue to present a significant threat to Israel, the Middle East, and beyond. If confirmed, you will be responsible for supervising the department and implementation of interagency policies abroad. I expect, and hope that you will maintain a strong working relationship with this committee and encourage department officials at all levels to be responsive to committee requests. We have strong constitutional requirements in this regard, and I hope you will work with us. On the nominee to be ambassador to Bahrain, I'm pleased to see Stephanie Hallett nominated. Bahrain is a critical ally. It is the only Gulf participant in the maritime coalition against the Houthis, and it has hosted the U.S. Navy since the Second World War. This week marks 1 year since the Comprehensive Security, Integration, and Prosperity Agreement between the U.S. and Bahrain. This agreement enhances bilateral ties, and I want to hear how you will take this U.S.-Bahrain relationship further. On the nominee to Bosnia and Herzegovina, that country faces some of the toughest political challenges since the creation of its current political system. Despite various U.S. and EU-led reform efforts to increase European integration, Bosnia still faces serious risks posed by tough economic conditions, malign foreign influence, and the secessionist movement of Republika Srpska. Bosnia's future is critical, particularly for stability across the Western Balkan regions and broader Europe. I look forward to hearing how you plan to support a productive U.S. policy in Bosnia. Moving into the nomination for ambassador to Malawi, Malawi currently faces severe economic challenges and has important general elections next year. The U.S. is committed to Malawi's ongoing democratic consolidation. Following the unexpected departure of our last ambassador, Mr. Heath's nomination is timely and critical to support U.S. interests in Malawi. Finally, on the nomination of ambassador to Togo, Togo is an important partner in efforts to build resilience against violent extremism and counter global actors in coastal West Africa. The next ambassador must work closely with the Togolese government, which is increasingly vulnerable to security threats in neighboring Sahel states. We must also help open the Togolese political system to be more inclusive and democratic for the country's future stability. I look forward to hearing ideas on how to make this a reality. Before I close, I want to address the status of nominees in our committee and the allegations, untrue, that our side does not value having confirmed ambassadors to compete with adversaries. Nothing is further from the truth. I've said over and over again, I was a governor, and I understand to operate government, you need to have people in place. I've always worked in good faith to move qualified career nominees. Unfortunately, the State Department regularly disregards this good faith cooperation. This committee should not and cannot rubber stamp nominees while state continues to be unresponsive to oversight requests. Our solemn constitutional duty demands, and our oath of office demands, that we take this job and take this job seriously. I still have no response from the administration to my letters regarding basic questions about the suspension of Special Envoy Robert Malley's security clearance. The chairman has worked with me on this, trying to get this information. He hasn't been able to get it either. This just is unacceptable. This committee has constitutional duties of oversight. We're entitled to the information. I also have numerous other letters to the department that wait answers. Now, USAID cites the Privacy Act to withhold information needed to review personnel files of people up for promotion. There is a severe lack of cooperation on important information requests. Cooperation is a two-way street, but often the administration only wants it one way. This blatant disregard for keeping the Senate informed extends to many of my colleagues, whose only recourse is to hold nominees on the Senate floor. The Senate is charged with advice and consent, but the administration disregards the advice part. As a result, we're left with only the penalty of the consent part. These are not just words, but are serious constitutional obligations. We are bound to take every action necessary to do our job. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We are bound to take every action necessary to do our job, and so it shall be. Notwithstanding the whining to the contrary, we are going to continue to insist that we get this information and use the only penalty available to us, which should not be, but is, simply because of the lack of cooperation on the other side. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Risch. And I believe we can do both. We can do our proper oversight, and we need to make sure we confirm our ambassadors or at least have the hearings and determined by the majority vote as to whether we should recommend the nominees to the full Senate. But I agree with you, we also need to carry out our oversight responsibilities, and I have always exercised my authority as chairman to assist you in that regard, and will continue to do that. But I do think we need to move our nominees, particularly our career nominees, out of our committee.
Mr. Chairman, can
Certainly.
I respond? Briefly, first of all, I want to thank you for helping me with the Malley situation. I mean, this is unconscionable. You and I both hammered as hard as we could on the administration, and they not only snubbed me, they snubbed you. We are entitled to this information. This is the Committee of Oversight. For them to continually stiff-arm us on this, and the reasons they use are unconscionable. We have the same security clearances that they do, in some cases more, and they still won't give us the information. It's not right. So what do you do? I mean, we can either fold our tent and go home and say, well, okay, you know, you can have your way.
No, I agree with you on this issue, but you're focusing, I think, on the wrong agency. It's not Department of State, it's the Department of Justice. And I would agree with you, the Department of Justice, because of its traditional independent standing, has very rigid rules in regards to sharing information. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I've said that I don't agree with it. But it's not the Department of State, and the leverage on the Department of State is not going to change the Department of Justice.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, and I mean that sincerely, the State Department has the information. They admitted to you and I that they do have that information. And they say they cannot release it because they're told not to by the Justice Department. We're at least as good as the Department of State. If State can have it, we can have it. We both have a joint obligation here. So in any event, I guess it is what it is. And I don't know I don't know why they don't trust us with the information, but we'll have to do what we have to do, and I guess they'll do what they have to do.
And I hope our nominees are still willing to go forward with their positions. With that, let me turn to Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by congratulating all of our nominees this morning. Thank you for your willingness of you and your families to continue to serve this country. And welcome to the Foreign Relations Committee. As you know, usually we get along pretty well on this committee. And I think what you heard is a legitimate difference of opinion on an issue. But this morning, I'm especially honored to be able to introduce Julie Smith, our current ambassador to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and President Biden's nominee to be the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. I chair the Subcommittee on Europe and Regional Security Cooperation, and I'm co-chair of something called the Senate NATO Observer Group. And in those capacities, I've had the opportunity to work closely with Ambassador Smith over the past 3 years. She has made it her priority to frequently brief members of Congress on her efforts at NATO, and I think that's really been important to ensuring bipartisan support for the alliance. During her time at NATO, she's deftly navigated some of the most consequential policy decisions for the alliance, certainly in my lifetime. She coordinated our intelligence sharing ahead of Russia's invasion of Ukraine to ensure a swift and unified response. She helped secure the enlargement of NATO to include Sweden and Finland, which has ultimately strengthened NATO's preparedness in light of new challenges. And alongside our NATO allies, our other allies, she helped launch NATO's strategic concept, which serves as the blueprint for NATO's policy for the next decade as we address future challenges. And I think something that is of particular concern to this committee and to the Senate is her efforts to increase defense spending among allies in NATO. 23 allies are now meeting the defense spending target, up from 6 prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And certainly Ambassador Smith has been critical in making that happen, so thank you. And she's not just strengthened NATO and galvanized the world in support of Ukraine. She's led efforts to broaden NATO's engagement toward the Indo-Pacific. Ambassador Smith led the first ever trip of NATO ambassadors to Japan and South Korea, and she has consistently advocated among allies to ensure that NATO bolsters its partnerships with our Indo-Pacific partners as we address the multitude of security challenges that are posed by the People's Republic of China. I believe this experience has prepared her well to undertake the role of Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. Her recent experience builds upon almost 30 years of working on security issues both in and out of government. She's worked at both the Pentagon and the White House and at some of America's most esteemed think tanks, including the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the German Marshall Fund, and the Center for New American Security. And prior to her current role, and I think this is of particular interest to the committee, she spent 3 years researching Europe's evolving attitudes and vulnerabilities as they relate to China, which is a subject that is of great concern not just to this committee, but to the entire Congress. I want to acknowledge Ambassador Smith's husband, David, and Senator Megan, who are here this morning. And Ambassador Smith, I'm sure that your late father would be very proud of your recent nomination. I'm delighted that we are here considering Ambassador Smith's nomination before this committee, and I'm sure that my colleagues will agree and appreciate her thoughtful answers to our questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. I'll now introduce the 4 other nominees. They all have a lot in common. They've all devoted their careers to public service in the State Department and in foreign policy issues, and we thank them. They all bring a broad experience to the position that they have been nominated to. Stephanie Hallett is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service. She currently serves as the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem and serves as Charge d'Affaires from July to November of 2023. I particularly want to acknowledge her extraordinary work during the horrific October 7th attack. She was on the ground. She saw firsthand the brutality of Hamas and was our ambassador there literally to help explain what was happening and U.S. strong support for Israel. So we particularly appreciate that service. Doug Jones assumed his responsibilities as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs in September of 2021. He oversees European security, including NATO and OSCE, and conventional arms control, Northern Europe, including the United Kingdom, Ireland, and the Nordic and Baltic countries, as well as Arctic security. Most recently, Mr. Jones served as Charge and Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Mission at NATO. He served 2 other assignments as Deputy Chief of Mission at U.S. Embassies in Croatia and Montenegro. Michael Heath is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service with the rank of Minister Counselor. Is Deputy Assistant Secretary for West Africa in the Bureau of African Affairs. He was previously Charge and Deputy Chief of Mission in Bangkok, Thailand. He also serves as the Acting Deputy Chief of Mission in Canberra, Australia. Mary Dashbaugh is a career member of the Senior Foreign Service with the rank of Counselor, is currently Deputy Chief of Mission in the Republic of Cameroon, where she's also serves as Charge. She was also the Charge and Deputy Chief of Mission in the Republic of Congo, and again, she has a long list of service in her career positions. We welcome all of you to the committee. Your full testimony will be included in our record. You may proceed as you wish. We ask that you try to summarize your comments in about 5 minutes, leaving time for questions from the members. And with that, we'll start with Ambassador Smith.
Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, distinguished senators, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am deeply grateful to President Biden and Secretary Blinken for nominating me to serve as the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. If confirmed, it would be an honor to serve as the 3rd woman in this role since it was created in 1959. I want to start by thanking my husband David and our 2 sons, Liam and Dylan. I would not be here today without their love, support, and sacrifice. I also want to thank my mother and my stepfather who are watching from the beautiful woods of northern Michigan, and my sister who has joined us here today for their guidance and encouragement. As we all know, today marks 23 years since the September 11th terrorist attacks, and I want to begin by honoring the nearly 3,000 innocent people who were killed on that tragic day. We must never forget the victims of al-Qaeda's horrific attacks, their families, and of course the first responders who risked their own lives to save others. The 9/11 attacks profoundly changed American foreign policy. ushering in more than 2 decades of focus on the threat of violent extremism and dangerous non-state actors. Today, terrorism remains a major challenge, and we must remain vigilant. But over my decades of work on national security, I have seen the rise of other threats and challenges. From Russia's flagrant war of aggression in Ukraine to China's attempts to dismantle and rewrite the rules of the international system, to Iran and North Korea's malign and destabilizing actions, the United States is tackling a complex set of national security challenges. This demands a strong, bipartisan, and innovative foreign policy that advances our interests, upholds our values, and protects our people. Our alliances and partnerships around the world are the envy of our rivals. Our ability to mobilize like-minded countries in institutions like the United Nations, in alliances like NATO, or even in smaller coalitions is an extraordinary strategic advantage. But that doesn't just happen on its own. If confirmed, it will be one of my highest priorities to expand and sharpen this unique strategic edge. As U.S. Ambassador to NATO, I have seen firsthand the value of U.S. leadership and the power of alliances. Today, NATO is stronger, bigger, and more united than ever. Our allies are spending more on defense, and they've stepped up to support Ukraine. NATO has strengthened its toolkit on cybersecurity and protecting critical infrastructure, and it's deepened its work with its Indo-Pacific partners. If I earn your support, I will bring principled and tough-minded U.S. leadership to the role of Undersecretary for Political Affairs. I will invest deeply in key relationships with allies and partners to share the burden of our common security and to tackle pressing challenges together. I have great admiration for all of my colleagues at the Department of State. I am so grateful for the commitment that they have to public service, and I would relish the opportunity to work closely with them to do even more for the American people. And I commit to you that if confirmed, I will continue to consult, to cooperate, and work with Congress towards our common goals. Your support and partnership are central to our collective foreign policy success. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Sally?
Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, and distinguished members of the committee, I am honored to appear before you today as President Biden's nominee to serve as Ambassador to the Kingdom of Bahrain. I am grateful for the confidence that the President and Secretary Blinken have placed in me. I'm proud to share this day with my husband, Bob Castro, and our daughter, Grace. I'm beyond grateful for their love and commitment to service. I am also very proud to be joined by my mom and Foreign Service colleague, Kathy Hallett. I owe so much of who and where I am to her. My late father, Barry, served as a U.S. Marine and combat veteran and would be beaming to see me sitting before you today. I am thankful for the love of my sister Kelly and stepmother Karen, and for the mighty support of colleagues and friends, especially Patty. I first answered the call to public service by joining the State Department in the aftermath of September 11th, and so it is especially poignant to be sitting before you here today. Over the past 2 decades, I've been proud to advance U.S. interests in the Middle East and to support greater stability, prosperity, and opportunity for the people of that region. This month, we commemorate the 4th anniversary of the signing of the Abraham Accords. From my perch in Jerusalem, I have seen firsthand the commitment that Bahrain and Israel share to their bilateral partnership. If confirmed, I will seek ways to deepen and strengthen the ties between Jerusalem and Manama. Bahrain's hosting of NAVCENT and the combined maritime forces is critically important in the face of growing threats to maritime security in the region. Bahrain is committed to strengthening our partnership, including through the U.S.-Bahrain Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement, CCIPA for short. If confirmed, I will continue to enhance this partnership to jointly address threats to regional stability. Building upon the bedrock of our security and defense ties, CCEPA also seeks to deepen our bilateral economic and technological cooperation, presenting new opportunities for American businesses. If confirmed, I will ensure CCEPA continues to yield value to the American people. Since I first arrived in Manama a decade ago, Bahrain has made strides in advancing human rights, but more progress can be made. If confirmed, I will support Bahrain's efforts to continue improving human rights and encourage an inclusive society and political dialogue. The United States overwhelmingly remains Bahrain's strategic partner of choice. If confirmed, I will work to ensure Bahrain's relations with Russia and China do not negatively impact U.S. interests. Bahrain is clear-eyed about its diplomatic engagement with Iran, and we will continue working together to defend against Iran's aggression and plotting. As always, if confirmed, my highest priority will be the safety of American citizens, including U.S. service members in Bahrain. Thank you again for the honor to address this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Jones.
Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, and distinguished members of this committee, it is an honor to appear before you today as President Biden's nominee to be the U.S. Ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina. If confirmed, I pledge to work closely with this committee and others in Congress to advance U.S. interests in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I would not be here today without the love and support of my family, friends, and colleagues. I'd like to thank my wife, Karen, who I met 24 years ago in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where she worked for almost 7 years with NGOs helping refugees return home from the war, for her love and support throughout many postings, frequent moves, and long separations. We are blessed with our daughter, Sophia, and her remarkable resilience and indomitable sense of adventure growing up through multiple moves, countries, and schools. I'm grateful to my parents and my sisters, Allison, Lorraine, and Hillary. To my late father, who served in the military and was also a Foreign Service officer, I am indebted for instilling in me a calling to public service and for showing me the power of the United States and its values to inspire positive change throughout the world. And to my mother, who always championed my education and supported me whatever direction I decided to take. The security and stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina is a critical piece to the United States' goal of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. The United States has played a pivotal role in Bosnia and Herzegovina for decades, bringing an end to a horrible war through the Dayton Peace Accords, which laid the foundation for peace and stability. Bosnia and Herzegovina has tremendous potential, but that potential is too often stymied by corruption, ethno-nationalist divisions, and political dysfunction. If confirmed, I look forward to leading our excellent team at U.S. Embassy Sarajevo to protect the United States' decades of investment in Bosnia and Herzegovina by supporting its Euro-Atlantic integration as the only viable future for the country, and working with our allies and partners on the necessary reforms for progress on membership in the European Union and NATO. I am committed to using all available tools, including sanctions, and supporting the authority of the High Representative when called for, to push back against internal and external malign influences that wish to break the country apart. If confirmed, I will support rule of law and anti-corruption reforms at all levels of government. Tackling corruption is key to achieving real progress on Euro-Atlantic integration, government functionality, and economic opportunity. Finally, I will work to thwart the efforts of local and outside actors, especially Russia and the People's Republic of China, that seek to undermine the security and stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina. To the Chair and Ranking Member, I thank this committee and other members of Congress for your interest and active engagement in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Heath.
Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, and members of the committee, I'm deeply honored and grateful to appear before you today as the ambassadorial nominee for the Republic of Malawi. I know Senator Coons visited Malawi in March 2024 with 4 other senators, and I look forward to welcoming Senator Booker, who I know intended to make that trip as well. If confirmed, I pledge to work closely with members of this committee and your staffs to promote and protect U.S. interests in the Republic of Malawi. I'm proud to be accompanied today by my wife, Michelle, my son, Nicholas, and my daughter, Claudia, as they have supported me throughout my previous postings in the Foreign Service, both in Washington and abroad. I would like to express my deep thanks to my late parents, Ronald and Yoko, and also to my brother, Chris, for providing me with the encouragement and the freedom to choose the Foreign Service as my career path, despite the geographic distance this created between us for long periods. I believe my current position in the Bureau of African Affairs and my previous work in neighboring Tanzania has prepared me well for the challenges and opportunities that await in the Republic of Malawi. My first exposure to Africa came over 25 years ago during the development of the original African Growth and Opportunity Act. Then, as now, our overarching goals on the African continent and in Malawi itself are to support democratic and accountable governance, foster private sector investments to expand trade and employment opportunities, and promote Malawi's human capital development. Malawi's recent history highlights the resilience of its core democratic institutions. The successful completion of its most recent presidential elections in June 2020, after the Constitutional Court mandated a rerun of the flawed vote in 2019, underscores the independence and competence of Malawi's courts and electoral commission. Malawi is scheduled to hold its next general election in September 2025, and the United States will stand with Malawi in its efforts to remain a model of governance in a region that has experienced severe democratic backsliding. This year also marks 60 years of U.S.-Malawi diplomatic relations, and we look forward to opening a new embassy compound next year. The strong bilateral relationship between Malawi and the United States is reflected by the government of Malawi's alignment with U.S. positions on key geopolitical issues. Malawi has denounced Russia's invasion of Ukraine and boasts one of the highest voting coincidences with the United States at the United Nations among African countries. Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, if confirmed, I will do my utmost to protect American citizens and all mission personnel, Malawians and Americans alike, instilling a sense of community and camaraderie amongst them, as well as our contractors, Peace Corps volunteers, and all others, will be among my top priorities. I want to give a special thanks to you and your respective staffs for providing me with this opportunity to appear before you and the rest of the committee today. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your comments. We'll now hear from Ms. Dashbaum.
Chairman Cardin, Ranking Member Risch, and distinguished members of the committee, it's an honor to appear before you as the President's nominee to be the U.S. Ambassador to Togo. I would like to recognize my family for their love and encouragement, especially my husband Gabin, and also would like to acknowledge my sister and Ellen and my aunt Eleanor, who are here today, my mother Eileen, my brother John, and my daughter Gabriella, who are watching online. Finally, I'd like to recognize my late father, Joseph, who encouraged me to take the Foreign Service exam many years ago. Being here on September 11th reinforces how proud I am to serve our country overseas. I've served most of my career in Africa, including as the Public Affairs Officer in Togo. While there, I traveled throughout the country, from Lomé to Sinkase, and have fond memories of the warm welcome I received from the Togolese people and the important work we did together. The United States and Togo have a relationship based on shared goals of advancing peace and security and promoting trade and economic growth. And the United States is committed to working with Togo to strengthen its democratic institutions. Togo faces a spillover of violence from the Sahel and is a key partner to promote stability in coastal West Africa. If confirmed, I will continue to foster an inclusive approach that prevents the spread of extremism in a way that protects civilians and addresses drivers of conflict. The United States works closely with Togo to promote economic opportunity. Home to a deep water seaport and an airport with direct flights to Newark and DC, Togo seeks to grow as a regional transportation and logistics hub. If confirmed, I will advocate for American investors and encourage Togo to foster a business climate that is attractive to U.S. companies. And above all, I will prioritize the safety and security of Americans in Togo. The United States is working with Togo to expand services to underserved populations through the Peace Corps, USAID, the Department of Agriculture, and health programs such as the President's Malaria Initiative. If confirmed, I will ensure that U.S. assistance is well managed and reaches the most vulnerable. Togo aspires to become a regional economic leader and to reinforce its internal security. Yet, these goals require strong democratic institutions. Restrictions on the media, limitations on freedom of peaceful assembly and association, and impunity remain serious concerns. If confirmed, I will promote governance that respects these fundamental rights and responds to the concerns of all of Togo's citizens. Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee, I've confirmed I look forward to working with you and other members of Congress to reinforce our relationship with Togo at this critical time. I welcome your questions.
Thank you for your comments. I'm going to ask some obligatory questions that we asked all nominees. We'll ask you to answer either yes or no. I go through this every time, but I just really want to stress the importance of these questions because it really underscores one of the frustrations that was expressed with Senator Risch and myself on accountability. So I want you to think about these questions and recognize that by answering yes, you are making a commitment to this committee to cooperate in regards to oversight. So the first question is, do you agree to appear before this committee and make officials from your office available to the committee and designating staff when invited? If you just, we'll ask you each to go down the row so the court reporter can take down your answers, and a simple answer would be appreciated.
Yes.
Yes, Senator.
Yes.
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 Do you commit to keep this committee fully and currently informed about the activities under your purview?
Yes, Senator.
Yes.
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 Yes, I do.
Do you commit to engaging in meaningful consultation while policies are being developed, not just providing notification after the fact?
Yes.
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 Do you commit to promptly responding to requests for briefings and information requested by the committee and its designated staff?
Yes.
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 Thank you all very much. You've passed your first test. We can now go on to the second round of questioning here. We'll go through 5-minute rounds of questioning, and we'll have a second round if members have additional questions after that. So, Ambassador Smith, I want to start with you, if I might, and that is the world is dividing. We see Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We see the help that they're receiving from China. They're enabling Russia to use force and corruption to take on the sovereignty of other countries. We see Iran aligning in a way with Russia and China and North Korea. There may not be a formal alliance, but there is an alliance. And then we see countries that we thought were heading towards democracy in the West with backsliding. Georgia is a good example with their passage of the Russian-style reporting laws or registration laws. There's other countries that are trying to move in our direction, but Russia is standing in the way. Armenia is a good example. We're recently in Armenia. So my first question to you is, if you're confirmed, what is your strategy to counter Russia's aggression, not only on the battlefield, but on encouraging countries to join their alliance rather than the Western democratic states?
Well, thank you, Chairman, for that question, and I fully agree with you. We should be concerned by the evolving and deepening relationship between China and Russia, and I would add the DPRK and Iran as well. This is something I worked on day in and day out in Brussels, closely with our allies, to make sure that they understood what was happening, Iran's support for Russia, China's support for Russia's war in Ukraine through the provision of dual-use components. So, and you are also correct, that there are a number of countries that we see democratic backsliding. So, as I said in my opening remarks, the key here is our biggest strategic edge and advantage, allies and partners. And I commit to you that if confirmed in this role, I will work day and night to strengthen our relationships with allies and partners around the world, to hold Russia, China, the DPRK, and Iran to account, and to help other countries understand the risks of tipping in their direction and the benefits by aligning with us.
So in our conversations with President Zelensky and also with Secretary General Stoltenberg, the issue came up as to what is the next phase of the war between Russia and Ukraine. We know that President Zelensky is looking at ways in which there can be at least some understandings reached in the region to stop the active wars. But that would require security, so that it's not a Minsk I or Minsk II agreement, that there is a firm understanding that the agreements can be enforced and Ukraine's sovereignty can be protected. One of the ways to do that is a different relationship between Ukraine and NATO. So I would like to get your assessment as to how far NATO or the United States should go in trying to work out an arrangement that will be satisfactory to Ukraine in regards to their sovereignty.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, first of all, for your recent visit this past weekend to Brussels. Thanks to all of you that have frequently traveled through Brussels to meet with our NATO allies and Secretary General Stoltenberg, who's done an amazing job. On your question about Ukraine's relationship with NATO, here allies have been clear. Ukraine will become a member of this alliance. But given the fact that a war is ongoing on their territory, and given the fact that Ukraine has more to do in the area of reforms, the allies have reached the conclusion that this week, this month, isn't the time to issue a proper invitation. But we have to continue to move Ukraine closer to the alliance, and we've done that in a variety of ways over the last 2.5 years.
I recognize that, and I recognize moving closer is important from the point of view of Ukraine's capacity, the access to technologies and weapons and training and all that comes along with it. The question is, how far will the United States and NATO go in an anticipated settlement of the Ukrainian war and providing a security blanket for Ukraine?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I agree that we need to ensure that Ukraine has the protection that it needs. It needs to feel secure, obviously. First and foremost, it has to get those Russian troops out of its territory. That is the top priority. But after that, it needs to deepen its relationship with the alliance. And of course, now it has this vast lattice work of bilateral security agreements where many countries around the world, not just in Europe, but in other regions such as the Indo-Pacific, have issued these bilateral commitments to enhance their security and ensure that this type of attack from Russia can never happen again.
Yeah, I just would underscore that point. Russia cannot win in Ukraine. If they win in Ukraine, it will not end there. We all know that. So we have to make sure, NATO, the United States, the free world, that the end result is a Ukrainian sovereign state that is secure. And that does require us to recognize that the NATO alliance has been a red line, and that we recognize that Ukraine can benefit from that if we're willing to make the proper commitments to Ukraine's future. It also requires changes in Ukraine itself to comply with the standards that we expect. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Risch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Smith, I want to start. I mean, there's so much ground to cover here in the few minutes we have, but I'd like to start with the Middle East. And to me, there's only one problem in the Middle East, and that's Iran anymore. After the Abraham Accords and after the enlightenment of a lot of the Arab states towards Israel, it seems to me that all we have left is Iran. Now you say, well, yeah, but you got the Houthis and you got Hezbollah and you got Hamas. these are all extensions of Iran. And Iran really operates with impunity through these organizations. I mean, we look at what's happening in the Red Sea. We look at what's happening in Gaza. And these are all strings that are being pulled by Iran. Yet they sit there happy in Tehran without having to pay a price. In the last administration, we really turned the screw in them tightly. They were down to under 250,000 barrels of oil a day. And this whole thing's based on oil and money. Oil is money. Without the money, they certainly couldn't do the kinds of things that they're doing in Lebanon, in Gaza, or in the Red Sea. And yet, this administration has allowed the production of oil to go way up into the millions of barrels every day. Help me understand the thinking of the administration in this regard. I know at the outset, they wanted to sit down and try to talk about their nuclear ambitions and get a new agreement. But this isn't working. Give me your thoughts on this. I think instead of talking about these other things, we need to focus really on Iran. That's where the problem is. You agree or disagree with that, by the way?
Well, Ranking Member Risch, certainly I agree with you 100%. We need to maintain focus on Iran. This is a country that is engaging in terrorist activity. It is using a vast network of proxies, not just in the Middle East, by the way, in multiple other regions as well. This is a country that continues to suppress its own people. This is a country that is providing the critical assistance that Russia needs to pursue this war of aggression inside Ukraine. It is not only providing attack UAVs, but it is also now providing these short-range ballistic missiles. So we have to continue the pressure. We have to continue to work with a vast network of partners. We just imposed additional sanctions yesterday with the E3 in Europe in light of the news about the ballistic missiles. But we need to do more. We have to get at the financing for these terrorist activities. We have to protect Israel and continue to maintain our focus. So 100% with you. And Ranking Member Risch, let me assure you right here and now that if I am confirmed, this will be one of the key features of my mission, without a doubt, that I will spend an extraordinary amount of time on Iran.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. We're in absolute agreement on what the problem is. The solution, maybe we're not as much. The administration, in my judgment, has been a total failure on turning the screw on Iran. And I think it's because they think somehow they're going to get to the table and negotiate an agreement, which to me, any agreement with Iran is not going to be worth the paper it's written on. I don't. These people don't have the same objectives that we have when we're sitting down trying to make an agreement. I think almost any issue can be resolved if you have two parties that have two things, a similar objective and good faith. And with the Iranians, we have neither. Neither similar objectives, nor is there good faith on the part of the Iranians. So I think you guys are going to have to get a much more tougher on Iran than what it's been. And I'm refreshed to hear your commitment to do that. That's the only way this thing's going to get done. They really should have to pay the price for what they're doing, and they're not paying the price. They're fat and happy where they are and shelling the money out, a lot of it that we sent to them to do these kinds of things all over the world. Well, we've only got a little bit of time left. Tell me your thoughts on China. I feel the same way about China. Certainly, it's in a different way and at a different level. But again, the administration has not made China pay the price for some of the things that they've been doing. Your thoughts on that?
Well, perhaps as quickly as I can, Senator, look, this is a country that is telling a very different story than reality. This is a country that is trying to portray itself as neutral in the war in Ukraine, when in fact it's put its thumb on the scale and is providing Russia with critical dual-use components. This is a country that says it's good for foreign investment, and we know how hard American companies have struggled to operate inside China. This is a country that claims it's for peace in the South South China Sea, and we're seeing their ships ram Filipino Coast Guard vessels. So our job is multifold. We have to challenge them and use all of the tools at our disposal to call them out, to make sure that we can use punitive measures like sanctions, export controls, and all the rest. But we also have to work with countries all around the world, places like Africa, Latin America, Europe, to help countries understand the risks that they incur by accepting Chinese investments or interests in their ports and other bits of critical infrastructure. So this is an extraordinarily complex challenge, but again, count me in. If confirmed, I know that this also will occupy a lot of my time, and I commit to work with you. I know you have done an extraordinary amount of work. I appreciate personally the work you've done on NATO in China, which has been really important for me in Brussels, but this is a wider challenge, and I stand ready to work with you, Senator.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. Well said. I really hope you're able to take these words to the administration and tighten the screw much tighter than what we have, and in a good way. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shaheen.
Ambassador Smith, I want to follow up on Senator Rish's questions about the People's Republic of China as well a little bit, because at NATO, you work to increase our coordination with our allies, but there still are differences between how we view the threat from the PRC and how many of our European allies view that threat. So can you talk a little bit about that, and also about what you think we should do to address that more?
Absolutely. First, Senator Shaheen, thank you for the lovely introduction. Much appreciated.
Well deserved.
On the China challenge inside NATO, let me just say quickly, NATO has changed significantly over the past couple of years. I will credit the last administration with all of their good work on China, and we have carried that forward. You know as well as anybody else that this new strategic concept that was rolled out in 2022 was the first time in NATO's history that the mission statement at NATO includes the word China. That's a big deal, because the first step at NATO is recognize the nature of the challenge, and the second step is let's get to work and address and join forces. So we have made headway. We have to continue to bring in briefers. I know Deputy Secretary Campbell was in Brussels just yesterday briefing our allies on the subject of China. We will continue doing that, sharing intelligence, and then rolling up our sleeves and figuring out what more we can do to protect the NATO alliance from what China's doing in and around Europe.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, I'm going to give Ambassador Smith a little break and move to you to ask about one of the countries that I have grown most, feel most favorably towards, and that's Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's a fragile democracy, but it's a very special country, as you know, and it warms my heart to think that that's the country that you asked to serve in. I think Ambassador Murphy has done an excellent job there, but as you know, the challenges are significant. And one of the concerns that I hear every time I visit in Bosnia-Herzegovina is the concern about the EUFOR mission, whether it is up to the task, whether the resolution is going to continue to be approved every year, and what would happen if it is not approved, what then happens in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And so EUFOR's mandate is set to expire on November the 2nd, and I wonder if that is not renewed this year, or if EUFOR is otherwise unable to respond in a crisis. Can you assure us, and perhaps Ambassador Smith might need to step in on this one, can you confirm that NATO is prepared to step in to avoid a security vacuum? I know that Secretary General Stoltenberg has issued a statement on this, but can you provide any more details, and should we be confident that that will happen?
Thank you, Senator, for raising that important issue, and also thank you for your years of engagement and focus on the Western Balkans and Bosnia and Herzegovina in particular. EUFOR's Operation Althea does remain critical to the security and stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it is important that the UN Security Council renew that mandate in November, and also critical that EU4 remain strong, capable, and visible in its presence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that it has the forces and the capabilities to enforce its mandate to ensure a safe and secure environment. Without speculating on what might happen should the UN Security Council mandate not be renewed, I think it's important to reiterate that the United States has been clear that we remain strongly committed to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and multi-ethnic character of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And also, as you say, that NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg and other senior leaders of NATO have been clear that the alliance will not allow a security vacuum to exist in the country.
Thank you. And I assume you would confirm that, Ambassador Smith?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you. Obviously, one of the challenges there is the Republic of Srpska and Milorad Dodik's continued rhetoric talking about secession, about his unwillingness to participate and his party's unwillingness to participate in governance throughout the country. Do you think we have a plan in place to hold Dodik accountable for what's happening right now? We have some sanctions on him, but should he attempt complete succession of the Republic of Srpska, are we prepared to take action, do you believe, against him and that action?
I believe it is important that we continue to impose consequences on those like Milorad Dodik who are undermining the security, stability, as well as the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And as I mentioned, I would remain committed to ensuring that we use, if confirmed, we use all tools available to us to continue that pressure, and including sanctions, including supporting the actions of the High Representative to use the powers available to him to ensure that Bosnia and Herzegovina remains territorially intact and sovereign country. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to continuing to work in the Western Balkans and hope I will have a chance to work with you once approved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to congratulate all the nominees. Thank you for your service. One thing that often comes up in my conversations with our partners in the Indo-Pacific, Ambassador Smith, is the perceived lack of focus in so much of our communications with our partners, especially in the economic and commercial space. There are bright spots, tech diplomacy, supply chain resiliency activities, and others, but I continue to perceive a certain lack of focus when it comes to our economic diplomacy. When we do act, we risk leaving our allies confused, sometimes frustrated by inconsistent policies. I would cite IPEF and the zero progress on market access because we haven't made that a priority in part. How do you think, Ambassador, that our lack of a clear market-driven trade agenda hinders our ability to be competitive in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, thank you very much. Senator Young, I know we were able to have a conversation about this some weeks ago, which I appreciated. I am in full agreement with you that the economic piece of our Indo-Pacific strategy has to be front and center to everything that we do in the region. We have a multifaceted strategy, but I would argue that the economic piece is really at the foundation of that strategy. I would agree with you that we could do more I think we could be more transparent, more consistent in our messaging. We want to make sure that we don't leave allies and partners confused, because in reality, allies and partners have to be a key cornerstone of everything we do on the economic front. The strategy simply won't succeed if we don't bring them along. So if confirmed, let me commit to doing more in the economic space in the Indo-Pacific, and making sure that we don't leave any allies and partners confused about our intentions or what the overarching strategy is.
Thank you. I think one of the things we've come to appreciate in a fairly short period of time and in recent years has been the connection between our economic imperatives, our economic priorities on one hand, and our sort of broader strategic and security concerns on the other, and those are deeply linked. But there are some urgent, sort of strictly security gaps that we're attempting to fill. We need to keep resourcing the Taiwanians with armaments that we have promised them, for example. Many other priorities across the Indo-Pacific. What steps would you counsel to help push back against the PRC's coercive security practices and support deterrence in the region?
Well, Senator, this is a classic play on the part of the Chinese. The PRC, as you well know, regularly relies on economic coercion, and we have to push back on that in a whole multitude of ways. First and foremost, we have to make sure that countries don't find themselves in a position where they are at risk of economic coercion. So we have to provide them with alternatives, make investments. We've worked with the G7 on this to make sure that countries have the resources they need for their own economic prosperity. But we also have to call out the Chinese on what they're doing and make sure that countries like Lithuania, for example, that has experienced an enormous amount of economic coercion on the part of the Chinese, that we come to their aid and support. And we've worked with the EU on that hand in glove.
Thank you. Ms. Hallett, in 2016, Bahrain joined Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries in severing diplomatic ties with Iran after the Iran-backed terrorist attack on the Saudi embassy in Tehran. In recent months, we've seen efforts by Bahrain and Iran to reestablish diplomatic relations, which is troubling considering Iran's support of Hamas's October 7 terror attacks. Ms. Hallett, how do you view this possible official re-engagement between the countries?
Senator, thank you for the question. Certainly, the Bahrainis have, as I understand, have been quite forthcoming with us about why they are pursuing diplomatic engagement with Tehran. Like every other GCC country, they want to be able to have an opportunity to de-escalate tensions as they arise, address situations that come up, and are very clear-eyed about the threats that emanate from Iran, especially inside of Bahrain, related to Iranian interference in domestic affairs and their plotting.
So as ambassador, what concrete actions will you take to prevent Iran's growing malign regional influence and, in particular, its destabilizing activities in Bahrain?
Senator, thanks for the question. It's a concern that I share. Certainly from my perch in Jerusalem, I have seen firsthand the impacts, the profound impacts of Iran's support for terror, interference, disinformation, and the like in Israel and around the region. I think it's critical that we continue to strengthen the relationships between the Abraham Accord partners, the United States and Israel, and expand those partnerships as much as possible, strengthen our commitment with Israel and with Bahrain, and deliver on the commitments we have made, for example, in the Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement that we signed a year ago, to be able to isolate Iran and its proxies and support Bahraini security.
coming to the end of my time here. I recognize that, Chairman, if I could just add on the economic front, there's tons of opportunity, as I'm sure Ms. Hallett is aware, in the U.S.-Bahraini relationship. We have a free trade agreement. They host military presence, but bilateral trade volume is only $2.85 billion in 23. I think that presents real opportunities for our country moving forward.
Senator, I couldn't agree more. And something, if confirmed, I would commit to deepening between the United States and Israel our trade and economic ties, which CICIPA has two major components committed to that, that I would seek to continue the great work that's been done over the last year.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
You just reached the end of your time. That was perfect. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Ambassador Smith, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the Asia-Pacific region. We had a good conversation yesterday about this. You know, it's a good story. 4 or 5 years ago, we had a convening with Asia-Pacific leaders, and they had a lot of very specific, very credible complaints about the United States' lack of engagement. And the good news is that we came back a year later, and there were more members of the Senate who attended the private meeting, and a lot of Asia-Pacific island leaders pleased with the progress. And so on PIF, on the Pacific Resilience Facility, on economic cooperation, on embassy presence and physical presence throughout the Asia-Pacific region, we're improving. So my question for you is, what's next? It seems to me that we are making good progress, and it also seems to me that this is the most efficacious use of both dollars and human resources that we can get, because showing up is an enormous deal. But I am wondering, what are the next steps? Because we've made a bunch of progress, but I think the PRC is waking up to the fact that we've woken up, and now we have to make even more progress. Your thoughts?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the time yesterday. I enjoyed our discussion. In full agreement with you here, we have made significant strides forward in the Indo-Pacific. We've engaged in new ways, unilaterally, trilaterally, bilaterally, and multilateral institutions. We now have this vast lattice work of networks across the Indo-Pacific, but we cannot be complacent. We have to double down. We have to do more. You're absolutely right. This is about showing up. This is about using the full array of tools in our toolkit. And for me personally, what I continue to be very interested in is breaking down those silos between America's Atlantic allies and America's Pacific allies. We can do more together. The challenges we face are global, whether it's cybersecurity or emerging tech or coercion. So we can bring these alliances, these allies together in new and creative ways and continue to compete and prevail in that competition.
I understand what you're saying conceptually, but I'd like to picture it in reality. What does it mean to break down silos between our Atlantic allies and our Pacific allies? I love the idea, but how does it manifest itself?
Thanks, Senator. Let me give you an example. In the last couple of years, last 3 years in particular, NATO has deepened its relationship with the Indo-Pacific partners. They have 4 countries in the Indo-Pacific that are partners: Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and South Korea. We are bringing those allies into the alliance to hear from them about how they cope with disinformation, how they have stronger cybersecurity policies, how are they protecting critical infrastructure, what's their assessment of the Chinese threat. All of that is brought into the NATO alliance, and then we share back. How's Estonia coping with disinformation in Russia? How are we protecting critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea? So the exchanges have been unbelievable in terms of the amount of lessons learned that are being shared, and then we're forging strategies and initiatives together that really build on the collective strength of both sets of partners and allies.
Thank you for that. One final question. We had a good conversation about press freedom, and I think there's 2 ways to look at this. One is that it's clear to me that this administration and the State Department have prioritized press freedom. It's also true that press freedom is on the decline. So I'm a little bit less interested in what are the current activities that we're engaged in, and I frankly include the Congress here, and more interested in what is it that we can actually do to change the trajectory, which is highly alarming. I know you prioritize it in your bilaterals. I know we try to talk about it when we travel. You know, I have legislation along these lines. But I feel that we are failing on press freedom, and I'm wondering if we can together develop a new strategy.
Well, Senator, I enjoyed our conversation on this, and I agree with you fully that we all, both here in Congress and across the administration, we need to double down our efforts in this regard. Press freedom is a core part of our values, and we cannot just look at these relationships in a strategic framework. We have to think about how we continue to promote our values. We can do it privately, we can do it publicly, and in some cases look at the full array of carrots and sticks to foster change.
Thank you.
Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to all our nominees today, I want to thank you for your service to our country, and especially our foreign service career professionals, that you sacrifice a lot of time away from your family and friends representing our great nation overseas, and really appreciate those sacrifices that you and your families make. So thank you very much for what you do for us. Ambassador Smith, you have been very popular today, so I'm going to continue that trend. During your time as ambassador to NATO, you've been a staunch advocate for aiding Ukraine and stressing the urgency of supplying it with the necessary weapons it needs to succeed. Yet to this day, the administration is restricting how Ukraine uses these weapons, specifically preventing Ukraine from using long-range ATACMS to strike targets inside of Russia. But it was true for the tanks and for the F-16s. Very slow. Frustratingly, Congress lacks a coherent explanation for these restrictions. I alone have heard 4 conflicting reasons. I've heard that it was necessary to ensure Ukraine is using their limited ATACMS effectively. I've heard these restrictions were to prevent Russian escalation. I've heard this lifting restrictions would offer very little strategic value because Russian military assets are out of range. And most baffling, I've heard that this will help keep the door open for future relations with Russia when you have a dictator in charge of a country. I'm not sure why we're worried about that. Let's be clear, none of these reasons really pass the muster. Ambassador Smith, do you support removing the current restrictions on Ukraine's ability to use U.S.-supplied weapons to strike military targets inside Russian territory? And if not, why not? And what is your understanding for why these restrictions need to be?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator Ricketts. Let me start by saying we absolutely have to ensure that Ukraine prevails. We've learned in the past that if dictators succeed, if Russia succeeds in taking over Ukraine, it will likely keep going. So our number one priority, and my number one priority while I've been in Brussels, has been to ensure that they have the support they need to prevail on the battlefield. You are right that there is a debate right now about the degree to which the Ukrainians can use our assets, particularly the ATACMS, to strike deeper into Russian territory. And that debate is ongoing, and let me just say, if confirmed, I look forward to joining that debate. It is about risk in a large part. I have certain views on risk. Other members of the administration may not share that view, but I want to be part of the debate. I look forward to it if confirmed. And the bottom line has to be that Ukraine has what it needs. And if confirmed, I look forward to working with you on this.
So what do you see as the reason for why these restrictions have been put in place? Let's just take the ATACMS. So why haven't we allowed Ukraine to use ATACMS to strike military targets inside of Russia? And if the administration reverses this position, as the President Biden said, asked yesterday, I think he said they're working on lifting the restrictions. Why is it taking, it's been a year since we've given them an ATACMS, why is it taking so long to lift them?
Well, Senator, maybe 2 quick words on that. First and foremost, we do have to be clear, as Secretary Austin has said, there isn't a single asset that absolutely guarantees success, so we have to keep that in perspective. But I do think that as the administration has looked at providing different military capabilities, it is always thinking about the balance, and risk comes into play here. But again, I know these debates are ongoing, and I look forward to joining them.
So if confirmed, do you commit to working with your colleagues across the interagencies to lift these restrictions?
I look forward to joining the debate, and I'd like to work with you and others on the committee on this particular question.
Great. Thank you, Ambassador. I'm going to switch gears on you just a little bit here. On Friday, the Wall Street Journal confirmed what has long been expected, that Iran has sent the first batch of hundreds of short-range ballistic missiles to Russia. You said the same thing yourself in earlier testimony. The deliveries come as Ukraine's air defenses are being overwhelmed by Russian missiles and drone barrages. And unlike the Biden administration's ongoing restrictions on Western-supplied weapons to Ukraine, I don't think that Iran is going to put any restrictions on how Russia uses any missiles it gives to them. In March, G7 leaders warned that they would impose coordinated sanctions on Iran if they carried out these missile transfers. EU officials even threatened that missile transfers would constitute a red line that could see them directly wind back some of the sanctions relief from JCPOA. However, despite these warnings, Iran has still proceeded with the escalation, clearly showing Iran doesn't care or fear any potential consequences imposed by the administration or our European allies. It's clear that sanctions on Iran aren't going to cut it. Ambassador Smith, since the start of the administration, Iranian oil exports have exceeded over $100 billion, which has allowed the IRGC to produce the missiles and drones it's sending to Putin to kill our Ukrainians and attack our ally Israel. Do you believe stronger enforcement of oil sanctions is necessary to limit the IRGC's funding?
Senator, thank you for that question. Look, I have spent the better part of the last year pushing our European allies to fully understand the degree to which Iran is supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. It has been a top priority for me, and it will remain so. We have to work in concert with our allies and partners to apply pressure on this regime and call out what they are doing to support Russia. But we also have to join forces with our friends in Europe and beyond to get the Ukrainians the maximum amount of air defense that they need right now to protect their people, to protect critical infrastructure, which the Russians are targeting almost each and every day, and make sure that they can continue to defend their territory. If confirmed, I certainly will continue focus on Iran specifically and what it is doing to support Russia, but also its wider, long list of destabilizing behavior around the world.
And then just on that, with regard to if you're confirmed and with regard to Iran, will you commit to working with our allies in London, Berlin, and Paris to trigger the snapback of the pre-JCPOA UN sanctions on Iran, including the UN global arms embargo, as well as other UN drone and missile restrictions?
Senator, again, I've worked hand in glove with our European allies to push them as much as possible on this particular challenge, and I will continue to do so.
Great. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being lenient with me as well.
Oh, you're a little bit,
I was better than young.
no question. Senator Hemley.
Is there some protocol that the senior senator?
That's true. No,
go first?
I just wanted you to know that you have more seniority on this round than the senior senator from New Jersey.
And I will say, well, I will interrupt the junior senator from New Jersey.
I don't mean to embarrass my good friend Senator Booker, but if you got here on time, you would have been
wow.
earlier.
I would like just to take a moment that this is his first SFRC hearing. I've known this man for well over 15 years on foreign policy issues. He's been a great advisor to me in the past, the governor. He is thoughtful, he is knowledgeable, he is an extraordinary addition to this committee, and I'm so grateful that he is here.
We join you in that welcoming. And Senator Hemley, you're very fortunate to have Senator Booker on this committee with you. He's been an incredibly valuable member of this committee, and if you take advice from him, you're taking advice from the right person on many of these issues.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'd like a copy of the record, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As someone who worked for Senator Booker for many years, I've benefited from his guidance in foreign policy and in other areas of policy and in life. And to your point, it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard to beat him here. Chairman, thank you for the earlier recognition, and I look forward to serving on this committee in my short time. And it's a great honor to serve alongside you, Chairman, Ranking Member Risch, my colleagues, my senior senator, and very much look forward to serving on this committee in my short time in this interim role. I have to first start by honoring and respecting the American lives that were lost on this horrific day 23 years ago as the junior senator from New Jersey, home to many of those who passed and those who sacrificed their lives. For their neighbors in Lower Manhattan, I honor and pray for the 3,000 innocently taken and lost, including Adel Zachary, who I knew, loved, and remember on this day and every day. And applaud the strength and service of our first responders who have kept our communities safe and strong. To all of you, I'll be efficient with my time, and thank you for your service as a career staffer I'm grateful for your service to our nation and express tremendous gratitude to your families as well, knowing what they do to help support you in your roles. Ambassador Smith, I wanted to just pull on a couple threads I heard from my colleagues, if it's okay. Really starting with today's news, in light of Secretary Blinken and the UK Foreign Secretary's joint visit to Kiev today, notably, I believe, which is the first visit of its kind in nearly a decade, the U.S., our NATO allies, and the wider international community are looking to better understand the Ukrainian strategic posturing and its current objectives in the face of growing Russian aggression against civilian life critical infrastructure and the Ukrainian military's readiness with meetings with the Ukrainian president. In that regard, Ambassador Smith, how does your current leadership and your high-level involvement in de-escalation efforts in the Ukrainian war and NATO engagement speak to your ability to advise Secretary Blinken while working, as we heard from the chairman and ranking member, with Congress and this committee on the protracted conflicts which some seem to have no end in sight?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and welcome to the SFRC. Lovely to see you here. On your question, Senator, look, when I have, as I have sat in Brussels over the last 3 years, I have turned to the full toolkit that sits before us, but that starts first and foremost with diplomacy. And it has been an honor to serve as ambassador in Brussels, but I have also used my depth from working at the Pentagon for nearly 4 years as well. And what has become clear is that whether or not you're talking about the China challenge and competing with China, talking about the war in Gaza, whether or not you're talking about Russia's war in Ukraine, or a whole host of other issues, Sudan, the list is long. The secret to America's success on its foreign policy agenda is really bringing that full toolkit together. I have experience with diplomacy and defense. I would rely on colleagues to also bring development into that mix to make sure that whatever challenge we're coping with, we're bringing that full toolkit forward and relying first and foremost on diplomacy and then turning to other tools as necessary.
Thank you, Ambassador. A follow-up question, if I may. With the increasing pressure on the U.S. to grant wider access and usage of the ATACMS to Ukraine, coupled with our recent confirmation of Iranian shipments of ballistic missiles to Russia and Secretary Blinken's expressed commitment to ensure Ukraine is effective as possible in warding off Russian aggression, can you speak to how this shift in U.S. tactical assistance aligns with our prior and ongoing efforts towards de-escalation? And what can we expect, if anything, from the President's meeting with the UK Prime Minister this Friday?
Well, thank you, Senator. Very pleased to see Secretary Blinken with his UK counterpart on the ground in Kyiv. The United Kingdom has been an indispensable partner on the Ukraine challenge. They have provided critical security assistance, economic, humanitarian assistance, and of course trained thousands of Ukrainians. So I could think of no better partner for the Secretary. But you've heard the President say that ultimately this war will be settled at the negotiating table. We want to continue to work towards peace. We want to encourage Russia to come to that table, and we want to allow President Zelensky to determine the conditions under which he will come to the table. I understand he'll be presenting us with his vision for a way forward this fall. We look forward to hearing that vision, but in the meantime, we will continue to get them the assistance they need and encourage Russians to come to the table.
Thank you, Ambassador. Chairman, as I come to the end of my time, may I ask one more question?
Certainly, you can ask an additional question.
Ms. Hallett, an area where I have spent a good deal of time is the Middle East and the issues in the region. To piggyback off a question I believe Senator Young was asking, with the recent talks of normalization and diplomatic ties between the Kingdom of Bahrain and Iran, officially brokered by the Kremlin at the request of King Hamad, and the growing conflict between Iran and Israel. Ms. Hallett, if confirmed, how do you envision the future of U.S. security cooperation with Bahrain as they become more involved in a military dialogue and expand the regional security architecture and sustains a policy of détente with Tehran?
Senator, thank you for the question. As I noted before, I think that the Bahrainis have been very forthcoming with us about why they are seeking to have a diplomatic dialogue and relationship with Tehran, notwithstanding the interference, malign activity, and support for terrorism inside Bahrain and across the region that Bahrainis are certainly the most familiar with. If confirmed as ambassador, my job and that of the mission with our colleagues at NAVCENT, CENTCOM, the Pentagon, and of course the State Department would be to continue to deepen our partnership and take advantage of, for example, the agreement that was signed last year, the Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement, so that we can anchor Bahrain and our other partners in the GCC with Israel, with us, to be able to isolate Iran. That includes our coordination and cooperation on economy, trade, and investment bilaterally and then regionally, but certainly also in the new field that we have engaged on under CICIPA, which is dealing with trusted networks and technological cooperation, which helps buttress Bahrain not just from Iran, but also from Russia and China as well. And so if confirmed, I would seek to use all the tools in our bilateral relationship with Bahrain to make sure that we're addressing Bahrain's concerns and ours.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. Thank you all. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank all of you for your service to our country. And Ambassador Smith, many of my questions related to NATO and your ongoing responsibilities, some of them have been covered. So I'm going to spend my time asking a few questions of Ms. Hallett, not so much about your future post, but the one that you're leaving now. Because I think the last time we saw each other was during my visit to Israel in mid-July. The day I met you, I also met with hostage families whose loved ones had been kidnapped by Hamas. I met with families whose loved ones had been killed and murdered by Hamas, including some Israeli Americans. And I was pleased to see the Justice Department determined to seek justice in those cases. On that trip, I also visited the West Bank, and I visited 2 American families whose 17-year-old sons were killed in the West Bank, shot in the back of the head while they were driving. In both cases, reports implicated settlers or the IDF, but we've been not really able to get any information, even through the efforts of asking the State Department as to where these investigations lie. And you know, I must say we've written to Secretary Blinken a couple times for updates, not really getting a sense that the U.S. government is actively pursuing these cases. Today, can you give us any update on the investigation into the cases of those 2 17-year-old American boys?
Senator, well, first, thank you for the question. It was good to see you in July, and of course, a privilege to be here with you today. Look, as the Deputy Chief of Mission in Jerusalem, I and those in the mission have no greater priority than the safety and security of American citizens in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. The tragic death.
My clock is ticking.
Yes,
I know. I understand the words of being upset. I'm just asking if you have an update on the status of the investigation into their killings.
So, Senator, it's my understanding from the Israeli government that those investigations are ongoing. I know that's unsatisfactory. It is to us in the embassy as well, and I assure you we will continue to ask and demand accountability and a full investigation, as Secretary Blinken has done on every trip that he's taken. In addition, Senator, with the death this past weekend of Aisha Noor, another American citizen who was tragically killed in the West Bank.
Right, and of course, that raises the overall question about accountability. I did see the Secretary's statements just yesterday about that being unprovoked and unjustified. The Secretary also said, and I quote, "We've long seen reports of the security forces looking the other way when extremist settlers use violence against Palestinians." He also said, and I quote, We've seen reporting of excessive force by Israeli security forces against Palestinians. Do you agree with the Secretary's statements?
Senator, I do. And I think the question of the rules of engagement and the use of live fire in the West Bank, as Secretary Blinken spoke clearly about from London, is serious and warrants further attention and discussion from us at the embassy and from the administration.
Well, I appreciate that because when I heard the Secretary talk about the need to change rules of engagement, I had a flashback to the killing death of Shireen Abu Akleh. I think you arrived on post about 3 months after that happened. And in that case, the position that the government of Israel took for a long time was that she'd been killed by Palestinian gunmen. That turned out not to be the case. The Secretary of State asked for an independent investigation. That has not happened to this day. General Fenzel did do a report that's been classified that I think speaks to the need to address the rules of engagement. Have you had a chance to read that report?
I have not, Senator.
Okay. I mean, that is, I will say that's discouraging because, part of the problem is that the United States government, in my view, has not taken sufficient action to hold individuals accountable for the killings of American citizens. And again, if you look at what's happened in that case, I just want to close, Mr. Chairman, with the Washington Post editorial from May of 2023, so last year. It was on the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. It says, a year after killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, questions remain for Israel and for Biden. And the last paragraph begins, Biden has rightly been shedding light on Russia's wrongful detention of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, and I'm looking forward to meeting with him, I think, tomorrow. We're all glad. We all worked hard for his release. And they go on to say, and the disappearance of Austin Tice, a freelance journalist in Syria. He, referring to Biden, should be just as vocal about getting to the bottom of Abu Akleh's death and pursuing any necessary accountability. I would submit that has not happened to date, and so good to hear the Secretary's words yesterday, but we heard the same words a number of years ago, and nothing has changed with respect to rules of engagement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm. The senior senator from New Jersey, Senator Booker.
Thank you very much. I just want to pause and give you all the depth of our gratitude. You have spent your careers serving our country. We have a strange way in America of fetishizing in a disproportionate manner wealth and celebrity. But the values that have made this nation as strong as it is are values of service, sacrifice, and humility. The jobs that you all are here before us for have enormous world-affecting consequences. And on the global scale of importance, you can't forget the millions of families from our country to the ones that you all will be focused on that will be affected by the day-to-day decisions that you make. And so I just want to take a time to say I am humbled by the dedication you all have. Every senator here operates with our names in the paper, our faces before the TVs, but the work that you do is extraordinary. And I would be wrong if I did not point out that you don't do it alone. You all have, in your introduction, spoken of the families that support you, and they too are evidencing those great American values of service and sacrifice. And knowing the countries that you serve, and Ms. Smith, the work that you'll do, I just want you to know that as our tough questions have come, the truth of the matter is every senator here, I know, it has a profound sense of gratitude for you all dedicating your lives to this kind of work. Ms. Hallett, I will not ask you any questions. You've dealt with me a lot already. You should get combat pay for that, and I'm sure I'll see you again. Mr. Doug Jones, I have no questions for you because you share the name with one of my favorite senators I've ever served with, and out of deference to him, I won't ask you any questions. The rest of you, I think I have one question for each of you. Starting with, and I want to pronounce your name right. Can you say it for me so I don't butcher it? Dashbach. You showed obvious obsequiousness by mentioning the greatest city in America in your opening statement, Newark, and so that will make me go a lot easier on you. But I'm really worried about the Sahel and extraordinary backsliding we're seeing with coups and violence. And I want to be candid with you. I left my recent trip to Nigeria and Ghana, moving to me personally, especially Ghana as an African American, but I left there really discouraged. I heard from civil society groups alarming things about corrupt governments. I heard young people, cultural influencers, questioning why America is supporting these democratic governments that are not democratic. I heard people saying, well, maybe we need to go back to dictators. The crises in the north of all of these countries are growing, not shrinking. The terrorist activity is growing. And I just would like to hear from you maybe some encouragement about what we could be doing in Togo and the region to better stop these trends that are moving against American interests of seeing democracy and freedom.
Thank you, Senator. I couldn't agree with you more. If confirmed, one of my highest priorities will be to work with the Togolese government to address this threat coming from the Sahel, and that the way that has to be addressed is a whole-of-government approach. It cannot be a military-only solution. It has to be an approach that respects the human rights of the civilians who are living in those areas, that incorporates their concerns and their needs, and that is work that I would continue if confirmed. The other area that I would make a high priority is engagement with youth. Togo's population is young and growing, and they're increasingly frustrated by the lack of dividends from democracy.
And I'll pause there. I'm so happy to hear you say that, as we know that by 2050, 1 out of every 4 human beings on the planet will be in Africa. It is the continent that is going to explode in the latter half of this century in importance. And maybe with that, I want to go to Mr. Heath. One of the big concerning things I see on the continent right now is I think people are underestimating the impact of climate change that's going to further destabilize nations, cause more turmoil. Right now, Malawi is going through a horrific drought. And in that region of Africa, you're going to see the effect on the livelihoods of really creating crisis circumstances for tens of millions of people. What can we be doing more to deal with the coming climate crisis in that region of Africa?
Thank you, Senator, and thanks for your kind words about our service, and thanks for your focus on Africa. Thank you for that question. There's no question that Malawi is facing tremendous challenges. As you know, the population of 19 million people is projected to double by the year 2040, and agriculture accounts for about 75% of the workforce. It's heavily dependent on agriculture. They would like to shift more towards mining and tourism. One of the problems they've been facing in the agricultural sector is the lack of a road infrastructure. So as you know, our Millennium Challenge Corporation, the current compact that is operating in Malawi, is focused on improving that road infrastructure so that farmers can more easily get their products to market. USAID also has a considerable program to work with farmers to deal with soil conditions, help them with fertilizers, access inputs.
I'm going to ask you to pause there. I'm so delighted to hear your understanding of the nuance and the detail, and the power of these programs that we fund at a fraction of a % of our budgets that make such a massive change in the trajectories of those nations, and I look forward to working with you both on them. My Senate colleague just showed me something extraordinary. I thought it was better to ask for forgiveness, not permission. He asked for permission to go over instead of forgiveness. I'm going to just not go over too much, but Ms. Smith, I'm just going to say it because I am stunned in my nation right now that we are not focusing more on the crisis in Sudan. It is unconscionable to me that reports are that over 8 million people are on the verge of famine, and reports are if we continue at this trajectory that over 2 million people could die of starvation when I was coming up in the 90s, early 2000s, there was so much attention on Darfur. I mean, it was a celebrity focus. But now it's a blind spot in America that, to the grievous suffering that's going on. I am hoping, and I'm grateful, obviously, for our Special Envoy Perriello's work. I'm really impressed. Every time I talk to State Department officials, I'm grateful for their thoughtfulness. But we must do more as a nation. We must do more as a government. And so I'll say no question, just to just want to speak to let you know this is a urgent crisis facing humanity right now, and it's fueled by global power competitions that are undergirding this conflict and accelerating it, acting as an accelerant to the death and destruction and famine. And so I just hope that in your position, which I'm excited that you will ascend to, that you can make this a driving force, because what we do can literally affect the livelihoods and well-beings of millions of people. And I'm grateful to my chairman for him and his team being so centrally focused on this. And I know this committee, as I discussed with him yesterday, will try to do as much as we can to support American efforts to bring a resolution to this crisis. But dear God, I'm hoping that more people in America, and especially our government, will deepen their sense of urgency to resolve this catastrophic level of human suffering. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just thank Senator Booker for raising Sudan. It is a tragic situation. I also grew up with Darfur, and saying that Darfur, we said never again, and we saw the genocide in Darfur, and now we see it again in Darfur. It's something that we're responsible to make sure we do everything we can to prevent what's happening there. And here's the challenge, Ambassador Smith. We have strategic partners that we are doing security business around the world that are adding to the tragedy of Sudan. And it seems to many of us that we haven't put a high enough priority on making it clear that they have responsibility to be constructive in ending the violence that's taking place in Sudan. And to date, we have not been effective in allowing and making that a reality. So two things are happening. One, it doesn't have the visibility, and therefore it's not getting the attention it needs. And secondly, it does not appear that we've placed a high enough priority in working with our partners in the region to get the type of results that could be helpful in ending the tragedy there. So yes, I'm going to continue to put a spotlight on it. I'm going to work with Senator Booker. We have to do more. It is horrible what's happening there. It has been, in meeting with NGOs, they believe it is the worst crisis in the world today, Sudan. And that's saying a lot, because there's a lot of problem areas around the world. So we need to do a better job in that regard. So Senator Booker, thank you for raising that issue. I'm going to ask one or two more questions, and then if other members have questions, we'll be glad to take that. To Ms. Dashba, I want to follow up on the issue of opportunity. In December of 2022, the MCC Board of Directors selected Togo as an eligible country for development. However, Togo consistently is low in Freedom House's civil liberties scale, and according to the Department of State's 2023 Country Report on Human Rights, Togo's independent media, government critics, and opposition leaders face detention and torture. So my question to you is, as you use the MCC opportunities, it gives us some leverage. How do you intend to use whatever leverage we can to encourage Togo to have the type of reforms that we expect in countries that we have relations with?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Togo effectively used the MCC scorecard to improve their governance indicators. However, they have not made those efforts yet on the political side. And if confirmed, I would press them to do what they did on the economic side to maintain their eligibility, if they can do that on the political side. However, if they are not able to meet those eligibility criteria, I would support the MCC board's decision if we need to use those valuable resources elsewhere. These are important, significant amounts of money, and I do believe that Togo can make some changes in order to remain eligible, but that is something they're going to really need to do.
So in furtherance of the first questions I've asked you, I'm going to ask you to keep our staffs informed on a regular basis as to the progress or lack of progress being made in regards to those political reforms. This is an opportunity we don't want to miss.
Thank you.
So we expect progress will be made. If not, there should be some consequences.
It will be one of my highest priorities.
Thank you. Mr. Heath, corruption in Malawi is pretty high. It's a country that the U.S. barred entry of 4 Malawian officials due to their role in significant corruption. In May, the Director General for Anti-Corruption Bureau left after being suspended right before he was going to issue some warrants on an investigation. Journalists who reported the corruption issues now face jail time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what leverage do we have to deal with corruption in the country, and how do you intend to use our presence to further anti-corruption issues?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm aware of the stepping down of the chairman of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. She had been doing a very effective job until that time, from what I understand. Earlier this year, it was announced that the Anti-Corruption Bureau had investigated over 400 different cases of corruption, and yet only about 26 of them resulted in investigations, and there were only 8 convictions. So if I'm confirmed as ambassador, one of my top tasks will be to insist, both in private and in public, that the Malawian government redouble their efforts to tackle corruption at a very high level. This requires a significant amount of political will. It also requires resources, and I know that our government is providing resources to the Anti-Corruption Bureau and to the judiciary to increase their capacity to take on these problems. I would also want to link that to the problem of economic growth, because economic growth is something that Malawi desperately needs. Their GDP growth rate right now is only averaging about 2%. And as I mentioned before, with that burgeoning population, that's not going to be enough. They need to attract foreign investment. If they want to attract American investment, they're going to have to demonstrate that corruption is being curtailed, because corruption tips the scales against our companies who have to comply with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and it tips them towards adversarial countries that turn a blind eye to these practices. So that is, those are among the things that I would stress if confirmed when I go out to be ambassador to Malawi. Thank you.
I thank you for that response, because that's a very strong response. Again, I would ask you to keep us informed as to progress or lack of progress being made. These are countries that don't always get into spotlight, so it's important for you to keep us engaged on a regular basis. We'll send you reminders now and then that we expect this information, but it'd be good if you initiate status memos to us in fighting corruption in the country. So appreciate that. Mr. Jones, just want you to know we've been talking about this for a long time, and they need constitutional reform. Bosnia is a great country, but with the Republic of Srpska and the way that they behave, and with Serbia's views changing over history back and forth different ways, Bosnia needs the certainty of a system of government that protects its ethnic diversity and allows it to function as a secure state in the region. And it is important, I think, for the United States to support the current security issues, but to look for a permanent way in which Bosnia can be welcomed into Europe and welcomed into the region as a secured independent state. I know you know the history well enough. It's well past time, and it's a challenge with the Republic of Srpska. We recognize that. And Ms. Howard, I just want to underscore and appreciate your answers. The way to solve the Middle East crisis is to isolate Iran, and you've said that a couple times, and I agree with you. The fact that we have normalization, Abraham Accords with Bahrain and other countries that can work with us. We're working on normalization with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. If that comes about, regional security against Iran can be the answer for secured Palestinian people and Israelis. So I thank you for your response. And lastly, Ambassador Smith, I want you, as I've urged earlier, We're going to be working with you to ease the restrictions on Ukraine's ability to defend itself from the brutality of Russia. I agree with Senator Ricketts' point, and we'll be working with you on all those issues. With that, let me turn to Senator Risch.
Thank you, Mr.
Let me thank you all for your